So I released my first app on the App Store way back in 2013. It took me 3 months to make. It was absolutely awful. But since then, I've improved a lot and had the opportunity to work on dozens of iOS apps, both professionally and personally as side projects. So I wanted to share my current workflow for quickly ideating and creating new iOS apps and show you how I was able to release my last 3 iOS apps from start to finish in just 1 week, respectively. Let's get started. So starting with ideation. Now this was something I'd struggled with for a long time, but it all changed when I read Paul Graham's blog post on startup ideas, and then I saw this video by the founder of Twitch on Y Combinator, both of which are linked in the description. The main takeaway here was that instead of trying to come up with project ideas out of thin air, you should start keeping track of problems that either you or your friends and family encounter and try and build solutions for those problems instead. That way you have a way higher chance of building something that people want. So now I keep a problem notebook instead of an idea notebook. I'll also look at Reddit to try and find things that people are complaining about in the subreddits I follow, and I find that sorting by rising is pretty good for this. That's how I ended up coming up with some of my recent iOS app ideas related to photography, cooking, and fitness. They were all inspired by problems people were complaining about in communities that I understood. Also, every morning I religiously check these sites. Firstly, Product Hunt, which lists new products launching that day, then Beta List, which helps you discover promising startups, and finally Indie Hackers, which is a community of individuals trying to start profitable online businesses. And I found that it helps keep those creative juices flowing, and you see exactly what problems other people think they've identified in the world and how they're going about building solutions for them. Since then, I found it pretty easy to maintain a list of potential app, electronic, or website ideas. And if nothing promising comes from that, then I'll use Twitter's advanced search feature with phrases like "I wish there was an app" or "application" or "site" to see if I can find a diamond in the rough. Finally, if I'm really desperate, I'll use a site I made when I was trying to practice some web development skills called GetRandom, which in essence will randomly provide you a cool GitHub repository to look at, filtered by language and topic. I found that this approach helps me learn about new niches, and finding novel projects can often be a jumping off point for future ideas or helps give you a new perspective on an old idea. I'm absolutely awful at graphics and marketing, so I'll try and outsource it as much as I can. I'll rely on sites like Dribbble and Sketch Freebies for inspiration and free resources, and there's plenty of other sites to find free UI kits that you can choose from. From there, I'll use Noun Project for individual icons, and I'll assemble everything in Figma. When I need to make the final app icon, I'll use makeappicon.com, which will automatically generate all of the correct resolutions of the app icon you need in order to submit to the App Store. You can just upload your high-res app icon, and they'll email you once it's done processing. If I have a little bit of a budget though, I'll use Graphic River or Fiverr to get high-quality graphics and designs. I found that when you stick to the highly rated sellers on Fiverr, you get pretty reasonable results. For example, I was able to get my entire walking routes app designed for $12.50 and a couple of revisions along with the source files as well. And by now I spent a good amount of money on UI kits, so I have a nice collection to pick from of UI kits whose licenses are still valid. When I get started with the development, the first thing I'll do is try and come up with a name and use App Store Connect to see if it's available. I've made the mistake of making the logo in the entire app only to find that the app name is already taken. So I've started doing that at the beginning instead. This way I only have to go through the design process once. So unsurprisingly, I've found that I can develop much faster when things like the UI, fonts, color schemes, and animations are all nailed down. So no matter how eager I am to jump into the code, I force myself to wait until the designs are completely done before I touch Xcode. Otherwise, I'll spend way too much time tinkering with the design and redoing a lot of work. And as part of that, I found it useful to time box the design portion to 48 hours. Otherwise, you can spend days on design. So whatever I have done at the end of 48 hours, no matter how bad, is the design for version 1. And I know it's a little silly and self-imposed, but I found that I need this deadline in order to continue to make progress on the project. And as part of this design process, I'll spend some time looking at competitors and trying to understand why they settled on a certain UX flow and potential improvements I can make. And while I'm developing, I'll use a tool like Flawless App or Reveal to ensure that I'm staying true to the original designs. And as far as my actual development flow goes, it's pretty vanilla with the exception of some of the development tools I use to expedite the development process. I'll have future videos on these topics soon, but I'll use SwiftLint, SwiftGen, and Injection 3, and of course Git through the GitHub desktop app. So SwiftLint is a tool that enforces Swift style and convention, and it helps you just write more readable code. SwiftGen is a tool that will generate type-safe code for all of your assets, your storyboards, and your localizable strings. And finally, my favorite, Injection 3, is a tool that lets you update and test your code in real time without having to compile. It's not perfect, but it helps. And then the final tool I'll use is Postman, which I'll just use to debug network calls. Other than that, I typically just use storyboards and Swift. Currently, it's faster for me to put together a new app using those toolings instead of Swift UI, though I'm sure that'll change in the future. And I used to have this bad habit of leaving side projects incomplete, and I realized that keeping up momentum was the key for me to finish a project. So I tend to pick the technologies that allow me to make progress quickly and consistently to ensure that I can maintain that momentum. And I'll also look at awesome iOS to try and find some cool libraries that I can leverage that might help me reduce the amount of development that I need to do. So between this collection and my personal collection of Swift extensions, Xcode snippets, and custom file templates, my development flow is actually pretty fast. And finally, as far as architecture goes, I'll usually use a combination of MVVM and the coordinator pattern, or MVC, depending on the scale of the project and how quickly I'm trying to get out the door. Finally, for external dependencies, I prefer to use Swift Package Manager where I can, and CocoaPods as a backup. And I'm not commenting here about which one is better than the other. I'm just saying that my current collection of extensions currently only has CocoaPod support, so I just stick with it here. In all of my projects, I'll include some type of analytics framework, most often Firebase. And after I release the app, I'll monitor these analytics and try and determine the flows the user takes through the app to identify future improvements and features. I'll monitor to see what versions of iOS I can start to drop support for, find out more information about my users, demographic information, and so on. So I hope you enjoy this deep dive into my custom iOS development flow. This is the exact set of steps I use on my personal projects and all of my freelance work. If you have any questions, please just leave a comment below and I'll make sure I respond. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks.